Hello, everyone. My name is Misty Gaither, and welcome to Quest, a journey into true crime and the paranormal. And I am so excited, y'all, that I have with me Richard-Lael Lillard. He is the gentleman psychic, and he is alive in the studio. He's not on the screen. He's like right here. How you doing, Richard-Lael?
I'm well, thank you, and thank you for catching that. All hail Richard-Lael.
Right, and see that helps me to remember because around here in the Catholic and the football, we always all hail, so all hail Richard-Lael, everyone. Now, when I first came to know about you was on the Ghost Ventures, the Pasadena
Ritual House.
Yes, the Ritual House, and that to me it was something about you and how you conducted the seance and everything. I mean, it stuck with me. It got my attention, and I didn't think that practically 4 or 5 years later, I'd be sitting here getting to talk with you in person. So if you don't mind, tell me about that episode of Ghost Adventures.
In order to tell you about the episode, I have to tell you a little bit about how I got on the show.
Okay.
I had been working at the Beetle House. I was an actor. I was living in LA, but I did paranormal things. I've done that for 20 years at least. And they were remodeling the Beetle House, and I went, oh, I have to find other work, other means. And I went, you know what? I read tarot. I've been doing it for a long time. I'll just post on Facebook and social media, and I'll have people see if they want to come and get a reading.
Sure.
So I got on to, my friend sends me a message. He says, hey, I'm doing a podcast. Frankie Frank is his name. I'm doing a podcast. Maybe we could do a co-host thing. And I said, maybe it's possible. Why not? We'll give it a go. One of our very first guests was Patty Negri, and we were instant friends. We have been friends now for, however long that's been, 5 years now. The producers of Ghost Adventures asked Patty, they said, we need something that is a little higher end. We need something a place that's haunted, but we need an individual. And she says, have I got a guy for you? The house is haunted. Right. He's haunted. You'll love him. He's fabulous. Ghost Adventures contacted me. We set it up. And so I didn't get to meet Zach until, right before. They came in. They did a lot of the what you would expect with B-roll footage. And then Zach comes in, and he is charming. I have to say, I love Zach Baggins. He walks into my home and he says, I'm going to do my Zach Baggins
do
impersonation. He says, whoa, yeah, this is really nice. Okay, hey, everybody. So this is kind of like what I want my museum to kind of feel like. And everybody, this is really nice furniture. So if you have to move anything, don't drag it. Pick it up, because this is really nice. So we get onto the episode. They were finding a lot of things. Mm-hmm. A lot of things, which, of course they were. I was haunted the house was haunted, but there were some purposeful haunts that I had put in place.
Right.
That I wanted it. I bring in the guides and the spirits and whatever it may be. He says, okay. He says, actually, do you mind doing us a seance? I was just about to go to the hotel. And I said, sure. So I go in and I get dressed. And I set up my table, and I have my offerings, and I have the cards and the candles and things are burning. They go into the parlor and they close the doors. I can still hear them because it's just on the other side. And they've got their EVPs, and I'm doing my meditations. And the table begins to quake, and the rum, my offering to the Loa, begins to shake in that cup. And just as that rum begins to stir, they get an EVP that says, take a drink.
Yes.
And Zach says, take a drink of what? Of blood?
Yes, I remember that. Of blood. Yes.
And I had a little bit of a chuckle with that, because then when they come back in for the seance, and in my ceremony, whenever I conduct a seance, I always say, take a drink. Now we take a drink. And he says, take a drink, take a drink. Oh, it makes so much sense now.
Exactly.
So I was about to go then after the seance to the hotel, and he comes out with some photographic evidence. Mm-hmm. And he says, actually, there's so much activity that, we're not going to be here all night. We've got so much already. You could just stay if you want. Well, I'll just stay in my own bed. I'd rather.
Right.
We became good friends. Zach and I are still friends. And then when they were investigating the Los Feliz murder mansion, he called me back and said, "Hey, I've got to have you come back." Normally I go in blind, but I knew a little bit about the house. You can't help but not
Sure.
living in Los Angeles. I had driven by accidentally. I was just out driving one day, and there's this house, and I just sat in the driveway and I just looked at this beautiful old house. So I was intrigued, but I didn't know sort of the confines, and I didn't know what was affecting the doctor. I didn't realize that until we actually got into it. And then that was, I don't get scared usually, but this it was an old energy. It was pretty old.
Now, that episode, if I'm thinking of the right one, and if you'd like to, before I go into that episode, the episode with Richard, I believe, was season 22, episode 9. Is that
I
correct?
don't remember.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah. So it's very entertaining and very, I mean, Richard-Lael is very knowledgeable, and, you have the tap in right in.
Well, I was really lucky. I guess I could talk a little bit about how
I'm here
how
all night.
how I sort of became the gentleman psychic.
Right.
I always knew things. I thought that I was saying things like, "You're wearing a necktie," and people would go, "Wait, what?"
I happen to be, yeah.
So I mean, I thought it was that simple. And the earliest that I recall was my father. When I was 4, I was almost 5. My father had come down with polio. This was not 1920, but he did come down with polio and had slipped into a coma. My mother would ask me, "Honey, what do you want for your birthday?" And I would say, "My father is coming home for my birthday." And it was really heavy for her because she knew the intensity of the situation. My father died for 15 minutes, which is a long time to be dead.
Yes.
He was so dead. He said that he was cognitive the entire time. And he heard the doctor say, "We've done everything we can do. Notify the family. There's nothing we can do." So they covered him up with a sheet. They go out, they call my mother, who is on her way to the hospital now because she thinks she's a widow, again, for the second time. She is headed to the hospital, and the nurse comes back in the room to put the chart away. And my father goes, and the nurse thought, "Well, that's strange." And she walks over to the corner of the bed, and my father clears his throat again. And she picks up the corner of the sheet, and for the first time in 6 months, my father was able to sit up straight in bed and said, "How are you today?"
What?
She screamed, she
Right.
fainted, she passed out on the floor. The doctor comes running in. "What happened? What happened? What happened?" And he said, "I don't know. I just said hello and she passed out." The doctor said, "Let me tell you something. If a corpse would raise out of bed and talk to you, you would pass out too."
Yep.
And so my father came home the day and the night before my 5th birthday. And I sat there coloring. I was drawing furniture because that's what I obsess over and have for a very long time. I was drawing furniture, and my mother said, "Well, honey, are you excited? Your daddy came home." I said, "I knew he was going to, but I'll have him for 20 more years. A little more, but 20 more years." 20 years later, he died the day and the night after my 25th birthday.
Wow.
And then when my mum passed away, she was my best friend, and I didn't really want to know. I knew, but I didn't want to know. And I called her, as I did every day for 20 years. And she got really excited, and she was really happy. And, "Oh, well, hello," she says, "hello." And they said, my siblings said, "Mama, you know who that is?" And she says, "Well, of course I know who that handsome man is on my phone looking like the president." And I went, "Looking like the president? Okay, well, I don't know what that means." But I knew. I said it's going to be 3 o'clock in the morning. It'll be 3 o'clock in the morning. I know it. So normally I would sleep with my phone on silent, and I turned it on because I knew. And at 2:57, my nephew rang me and said that my mother had passed away, and I said, I know. And so 24 hours later, I saw her. She was in her pretty blue dress that she wore to my 3rd birthday, I believe. And she bent down and she kissed me on the forehead and she tucked me in.
Oh.
And I thought, okay, you know what? I'm not going to tell people because they might think I'm crazy. And I know it's grief and it's personal and it's not really for anybody. But she went to my friend, Lauren Morgan Richards, who's a brilliant author, by the way, Western author. And he didn't know my mother. He never met my mom. But he said, I think your mom came to me. She didn't look, I mean, she looked like my friend who's very much alive, but I think your mom came to me. And I said, okay. So I looked, and his friend looked like my mother when my mother was in her 30s. So I went, that's why. And I said, what did she say? He said, well, he said that there's 2 holes in your wall, and I think they're windows. At the time I was living in New York, and on the 3rd floor in this little tiny room with windows that were like the Amityville Horror House. And I went, yeah, that's it.
Right.
And he told me, she says, she doesn't like that they're covered. And I went, that's so my mother. She had to have big windows. And she says that you have a big mirror that's unstable, and she worries about that. I went, that's also my mother. And she says that underneath you have books that she used to read to you. And I said, that's also my mother. And he says, and she tells me, she said she really liked the owls by your bed. And I went, owls by my bed? I don't have owls by my bed. He said, well, it looked like it was a book. I said, well, I have magic books. Maybe there are owls. I don't know. And then the next day, as I was doing a reading, on the back of my cards are owls, and they were right by my bed.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've done it for a very long time, and that's kind of what I do.
Now, let me ask you this, because, being a psychic medium is passed on through the lineage.
100%.
And so who would that be for you?
Well, it's on one side it is my mother, on the other side it is also my father. So my mother was Cherokee, and she always called her grandfather Black Dutch, but that's not it, he was not Black Dutch. He was just African. He was not. Anyway, so my mother had that, and then my father's side, we traced our lineage back to 1570 in France, and they were the Huguenots, the French Protestants, and we arrived here in 1683. Jean-Baptiste Lillard is my direct ancestor, but on both sides they were both, to be so Pentecostal.
I was about to bring that up. We're going to talk about that in just a few.
They were Pentecostal and, dare I say, Republican and white presenting and Midwestern and you all of these things that they sort of presented themselves as. Yes, they were, but they were also, if there was ever a true Christian, it was those 2 people. They were kind and they were good and they were artists, and they didn't have as much issue with art as what other people did. And I have one little caveat on that. My sister studied art. They were proud of her. They were so proud that they just wanted art. And so they bought her art books that had the male and female bodies. Mm-hmm. It was art. It was just art books. And she had been looking through them for references, and she left them out on the coffee table. And the pastor's daughter came over, and she was so upset. And she went back and she told her minister father, well, I'm not going over there because the Lillards have pornographies.
Pentecostal?
Pentecostal.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had read that about you, and so I wanted to just talk briefly on that, because
Sure.
what I'm noticing is it's like I don't know if trend is the word, but it's like a common denominator. A lot of people in our world, in this paranormal mystic world, have that background of Pentecostal religion.
Absolutely.
And why do you think that is?
Well, unlike some of the more mainstream religions, whether you're Presbyterian or Lutheran or Methodist or Baptist or Catholic, oftentimes they sort of weed out. They sort of say, ghosts aren't real. Only the Holy Ghost, only the Holy Spirit. But you can't know things because prophecy. That was a time back then. But the thing with Pentecostals is that they believe in the gift of prophecy. They believe in spirits. They believe in ghosts. They believe in basically what is folk magic. My own father, when we moved to this little town, Alba, we moved in, and my father took my brother and myself around this 10-acre plot of property that they bought. And he had three things. He had sea salt, olive oil, and a red thread. And he went around that property and he said, the salt absorbs. We are the salt of the earth. We are that blessing. The oil is it's the newness and it's the freshness, and it keeps things pure, and it keeps things current. And the red thread is a sign of it's a blood covenant, and it's a promise that we are bound together. Now, yes, he had some biblical references, but those three things is what people use in witchcraft. It's just folk magic. So when you have sort of, especially sort of a Midwestern or Appalachian connection to Pentecostalism, they don't have the spirit rationalized out of them, which can be scary, but it can also serve for people like me.
Like us.
Like us, yes.
Right. Yeah, because when I was doing research on our talk today, and I came across that, and I was like, oh wow, yeah, because my dad was a Pentecostal preacher, and I know that people I've talked about this before, and how I was raised, extremely strict with the dresses and the long hairs. I know y'all are like, what? My hair was to my ass. Sorry, and the dresses, which I will not put on for nothing now. And it's like, but then I knew. I didn't really know what the gifts were, but like you said, because you hear the scriptures, the gifts of God are given without repentance, and the spirit of discernment and prophecy and all that. And I believe that because, when I was younger, it was, well, that's, like if I saw something or I heard something, it was, well, that's of the devil,
Yes.
and, that's not of God. And, I could do a whole week-long show on this. But anyway, it's just, it just really amazes me when I really made the connection of how many people have that in our world, of with the background.
Yes.
And so I was wondering, like I said, your take, and it's just, and it makes sense because, it is a gift. And now that I realize that I'm not going to hell for having the gift,
No.
and, and it's to share and to help others and to do more with it. And I'm just, feel blessed, to be a part.
My mother was, as I said, my best friend, and she had a really hard life. She was essayed by her stepfather from the time she was 3 until she was 15 when she ran away from home. And he would tell her, well, go ahead and tell your mom, I'll send you away. So my mother would do things to frighten him so that he would be away. And she would make pens dance on the table, and they worked in camps. So they would pick cotton, and they would pick fruit, and they would pick cotton, and they would pick fruit. My mother would say how she remembered the sound of that aeroplane that would go over, and that meant that was time to go to work. They would fly that crop duster over. But there was a woman who worked in the office, and she would make all of the camp announcements. And at 7 or 8 years old, my mother said, oh, there's that black-haired woman again. And her stepfather said, I told you not to go down to the office. And she said, I haven't gone to the office. Well, then how did you know about that hair color? She said, oh, I know lots of things. I know that she has 2 children. I know that she has a mole on her left shoulder. I know that she wears a ring on her right hand, but she's actually married and the ring is normally would wear on the left. Like she would describe these things. And he would say, see, I told you, you've been going down to that office. She said, no, I didn't. I never did. So my mother then went on to work for, she ran it from home. She got married to her previous husband before my father. And she worked for Zenith Manufacturing, making television tubes, radio tubes back in the 60s. And people would come to her and they'd say, hey, can you tell me about this thing in my world, in my life? And my mother would say, let me go dream about it and I'll tell you. And she'd come back and she would say, this is what I saw and this is what's happening. And they started calling her the witch. The witch. Mm-hmm. But my mother was Pentecostal, even in those days.
Right.
And she was afraid of going to hell. And then when I came around and I had these abilities, she said, well, I was just so afraid of burning in hell. And I said, Mother, first of all, why would you go to hell? What have you ever done that wasn't kind or good? Mm-hmm. And why would a God give you a gift and then punish you for it? You are not going to go to hell. She said, well, I know, but I was just, what if I did?
Yeah.
So that sort of is the counter side of it, because yes, Pentecostals believe in discernment and they believe in the gifts of the Spirit and they believed in prophecy, but at the same time, if people start calling you a witch, then witchcraft, the Bible says, suffer not a witch to live. Leviticus, I can't remember now, but it's in Leviticus. So it's a double-edged sword.
And it's whoever is at charge that time of how that it's perceived too.
Yes.
So that's a big jump from being Pentecostal to Satanism?
Yes, that's a funny one too. So
Yeah.
I have been. So I don't really go by the moniker of Satanist anymore, because I am not affiliated with the Satanic Temple. Right. I am not affiliated with the Church of Satan. I have my reasons. I have a lot of friends who are in both, but I'm not associated with either of those for personal reasons. However, I can trace my sort of attraction to it all the way back to when I was 5, 6 maybe, at a Pentecostal church. My late brother-in-law was the pastor of this Pentecostal church out in the middle of nowhere. And it was in the month of June. And what happens in June? Yeah, his sermon was the sin of pride.
Right. And
he talked about how that the devil comes as an angel of light. And then it talked about how the devil was beautiful and has good music and all. And I went, oh,
so my kind of party.
I kind of like these things.
Right.
So I sort of toyed with it for a little while, and then I moved to San Francisco, and then I finally was like, I'm a Satanist. But now I have adopted the 19th century term of diabolist.
Okay.
In the 19th century, the devil character was everywhere. He was on advertisements for tobacco and for gas, and he was depicted in curtain rods and finials and backs of chairs. He was everywhere.
And canned ham.
And even canned ham. He was everywhere.
Sorry.
He was everywhere.
Right.
But the literary works, when you talk about Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley, Lord Byron, they were called diabolists. Did they believe in the literal devil? No, I'm not convinced they were. But people of the like, Voltaire even, people thought, oh, demonic, because they painted the devil sympathetically as a humanist who wanted empowerment and wanted to encourage people to be as good as they could be, to attain what they could. And he also sort of was very rational. He would go to Jesus and say, listen, buddy, you don't have to do this. you're literally the Son of God. You really don't have, you could just say, it's done, and it's done. You don't have to do this. Why? What good does it do? So as a diabolist, as one who understands that we are all sort of the devil that stands in our own way, and we also have so much potential. So I use the term diabolist.
Diabolist. Just because you were saying like the term, the name Lucifer means bringer of light or something like that. And that's that you choose to believe more of a, not just like how it's portrayed maybe in the Bible or
Exactly.
in movies or whatever, but more of a, I guess, more human qualities or
Absolutely.
something than to be godlike, but
much
more
more
human-like.
humanist.
Okay.
There is a wonderful 19th century story, and I wish I could remember the title of it. But in this book, the devil has been sympathetic to humankind. And he was cast out of heaven because he stood against tyranny. And he wanted humanity to reach its potential. But he turned his eyes towards heaven, and he realized that he was in this pit. And he gathered his army. And he said, we are going to storm the gates, and we are going to usurp the power of God. And he does in this story. And he spends 1,000 years sitting on a golden throne. And the music is beautiful. And then he forgets. He'd forgotten. He gets, in a passing glance, he sees earth and the human plight. And he says, what have I become? I have become my enemy. I had it so easy, I forgot. And so he leaves the throne room and willingly descends back to hell so that he can focus on humans. And it's an old story, even before that. So in the Sumerian religions, there was a triune of gods. It was a pantheon, really, but they were known as the Anunnaki. Nonetheless, Yah, Ea, was the god of the fresh waters. He was depicted as a serpent that surrounded the fresh waters of the earth, and it was from his mind that he created mankind. It was spliced. Some people say that it was spliced with a Neanderthal ape and this god DNA, but it angered his brother, the god of the air, which was the war god who would later become Yahweh. That was, I think, Leal was his name. And he sends a mighty deluge to kill this creature. I'm going to mispronounce, but I think it was Adum or Adam or like Adam. But also Atom, Atom.
Oh, okay.
The serpent, in order to hear the cries of mankind, turned himself into a goat so that with his long goat ears he could hear the cries. Wow. And then when the god of the air was angry, he turned himself into a fish so that he could swim through the solar system and come out on the other side. He becomes half goat, half fish. He's Capricornicus, which of course Saturn is Capricorn, and Saturn is the devil in traditions, and it really represents challenges, but things that can be overcome. If you don't have any challenges, nothing ever gets accomplished. What is that old adage? Necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
And I think that's where the devil,
right?
Yeah, that's where he gets his human quality.
That is interesting. I really liked hearing that, and because like I said, I raised and I realized that there's so much more out there to learn, and I don't pretend to know everything about being a psychic medium or about mystical things and paranormal, and I don't pretend to do that. And to hear another take on everything is really refreshing. And like, do people treat you different, you think, because of your belief like
Absolutely.
that, than just like
So I am
normal?
beyond Ghost Adventures. I am well known I trend on TikTok ever so often because I did what was it called? It was a little show. It was called Odd Man Out. No, I did that one too, but it was on Jubilee Media about Satanists versus mainstream religions. And they had a Baptist minister and they had a Muslim kid. He was just a kid. He didn't know. And there was an Indian woman. And then they had three people who were satanic. I was independent. There was a fellow from the Satanic Temple. There was another woman that I think was independent but leaning towards, I don't know, one or the other. And the Baptist minister had souls to save.
Right.
And we met, and we're in Southern California, but you'd think he was in Kentucky. And he would say, well, how are you? Praise the Lord. And I said,
Right.
So we get into, they would have us sort of come forward, and they would ask a question. We would come forward, and we'd discuss it. But the problem was, it was timed, and this Baptist minister wanted to, well, as a Christian, we believe. And I went, yeah, we know what you believe. We know. Everybody knows. Everybody knows what you believe.
We're on a time schedule, right?
So I got to the point where there was one snippet where I said something to the effect of, I would never worship a God who would send someone to hell for thought crimes. It's cruel. It's inhumane. It isn't kind. And so people trend that all over TikTok. But I would not worship that God who would send someone to hell when that God would know what it would take to convince everybody on the planet. It would not take away free will. He could say, hello, everybody. I'm the right one. I'm the real one. I'm beaming this right into your head right now. You can choose however you want. You don't have to worship me if you don't want to. But just so you know, this is really me. I can show you. But that God doesn't. So I wouldn't worship someone who'd send someone to hell for not having belief when he would know. Why am I creating you to send you to hell? But I say that. I bring that one up because I still get hate mail.
Sure.
Years later, 5 years even after the Ghost Adventures one, I got a couple the other day that they oftentimes wish me to self-harm Christians. Once in a while there's a Muslim. Once in a while, rarely ever they're Jewish. Rarely. But it is 9 times out of 10 it's a Christian who will come in and they'll say, well, I just want to know, maybe we can talk and maybe things can be sweet. And I go, listen, I was a pastor. I was a pastor's son. I was a Sunday school teacher. I was a choir director. I have read that Bible so many times. I've probably read it more than you have. There's no convincing me. I thank you. And then that's when the swears and the threatenings, And then you add that to the already political climate where the devil is now everywhere, and it hasn't been this bad since the Satanic Panic of the 80s.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they do treat me a lot differently.
What about people in the community?
Sometimes they do. People have a sort of an idea about it's the devil. And when they do, I have had to end interviews because they will say things like, I only work in love and light, and the devil means anything dark and evil, and I don't think that that's good. And I'm a psychic medium, and Jesus was, and I go, you know what? I'm not here to be preached to, so I'm going to go. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they in the community sometimes they're, but I like to tell people I am an antisocial socialite. I am a recluse. I'm a hermit. I would love to never leave my house. I would love to have everything delivered. I would love that more than...
Didn't we have that like 4 years ago?
That is true. That is true. It was kind of nice.
You was like, yes, I'm in heaven. No.
Right? It was kind of nice. It was kind
Right.
of nice. I still do get all of my groceries delivered. I get my laundry sent out. I just don't have the wherewithal.
Right.
Because even still, and people say, well, look at the way you dressed. I mean, clearly. And I go, you don't understand. I dress for me, not for you. You don't have to like it. I dress for me, not for you. I should not let it bother me so much, but it sometimes does when they, when people think, they will laugh at my beads, and I don't. On one hand, I don't care because I like what I like, and on the other hand, I just want to be left alone.
Sure.
It's a weird balance, I guess.
Well, speaking of different things, the IDMB.
IMDb.
Yeah, that we know what I was talking about. So you have to forgive me on the this is our first time to meet in person, and it said that you were 4'10".
Yes, it does.
So when you come walking in, I was like,
I'm actually closer to 6 foot. I'm 5'11".
right.
And then I make no bones about it, but I do wear these lifted shoes, and I love them. They're sort of
But they're not as
but they're
yeah,
not. They're
yeah, but they're not like from 4'10" to 5'11"
no,
tall.
they're like that tall.
Right.
They're
Right.
like that tall. So yeah, I'm 5'11", and that's a whole just over a foot that I'm much taller than.
Yeah.
So I laugh about that, but no, it's. I guess I could get in and change it, but I don't know who changed it because I was pretty certain I entered my correct thing all those years ago, but
Who knows? This makes a good story, though, right?
doesn't it?
Yeah, like I said, it just, every Wednesday night, if you'll go and check out Patty Negri, she has the Witchins Coven, which you're a member of,
Yes, the
on the
Witches
panel.
Movie Coven.
Yes, where y'all kind of react to movies and different things. So tomorrow night, y'all will be doing it.
We
So what's
have
coming
Late
up?
Night with the Devil.
Well,
I believe his name is David Gaspachian. He is an acquaintance of mine. I tried to get him to come on the show, but I don't know him that well, so he hasn't ascribed to it yet, but I know that he's busy. But that's okay because I'm not going to spoil it. But it is Late Night with the Devil, and if you haven't seen it, you should see it. I'm not going to spoil it.
it's a good one, huh?
It's a really good one.
So every week y'all talk, go to, react to different movies, and you have, I think, 3 other people. See, Patty, you and 2 other people.
Yes, so there's Patty Negri, Heather Green, Courtney Buckley, Jason Mankey, and myself, Richard-Lael.
Richard-Lael, all hell.
All hail Richard-Lael.
And Patty, she was on the show, I think about a month or so ago.
I
really
love her.
love
She's
her.
so lovely.
And we talked about the Black Dahlia, and one of my favorite subjects is Black Dahlia, and it was just really.
She and I work really well together. She's known as the Good Witch, but our energies come from a similar place, so we always work really well. And I'm going to tell a little funny story. I think it's sweet. We were at a convention in Plattsburgh, New York, and she was conducting a seance, and this is how mediumship sometimes works and psychic work. So we get images, pictures, words, sounds, emotions, colors, and we don't know what that actually means. We don't know why we're saying what we're saying. And Patty is the lead, and I'm at the other end of the table, and Patty says, I think it's your grandmother, to this woman that's over here, I think it's your grandmother, and she keeps doing this thing with her hand. And the woman says, I don't know what that means. I don't get it. She says, because she keeps doing this to me, and I don't know why she's doing this thing with her hands. And she said, I don't know what that means. And I saw the woman carrying a dish, and I said, well, why is she carrying the dish? And the woman says, oh, I know now, because my grandmother was a smoker, and she carried her ashtray with her all the time, and she.
So between y'all two, you were able to pick up on the grandmother doing her smoking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's how it works, is that images and pictures, and what does it mean? I don't know. I had a woman come in the other day, and I said, oh, when I look at you, I see teeth. I just keep seeing teeth. And she laughed and she said, "I'm an orthodontist."
There you go.
See, I wouldn't know.
Right. Yeah, of course.
How would you know these things?
So you're here in New Orleans.
I'm here now in
and
New Orleans.
we're blessed to have you here in the Big
Well,
Easy.
there's nothing easy about the Big Easy, but I had always been fascinated with anything French,
We
mais oui. So I had loved New Orleans since I was a kid, and of course, there were things that I had known about my ancestry. My line is traced back to 1570 in France. They were the Huguenots. Anyway, so since 1683 we've been here, but since I'm not going to tell you when 1923, since I was born, since 1923 I've been obsessed with France.
with France, and here
I am.
you are. Right. It's for a reason.
It's for a reason.
Yeah. And so you do readings and
I do
tarot
readings.
cards for Marita Crandall, who
Yes.
is the owner of the Apothecary
Yes.
Potions, the Vampire Cafe.
Yes.
Maybe my house now. I don't. She's getting everything. I don't know now.
So, normally I was I had been working for myself, and I was doing well in California, but I'm new here in New Orleans, 1 year actually almost. And so I was like, okay, I need to have something sort of, because nobody knows I'm here, and I need to do something. So through a friend of a friend of a friend, they said, "Oh, I know this woman named Marita, and you'll like her, and you should talk to her." I said, "Okay, well, I'm open for it." So I go in, and I gave her a reading, and she says, "Oh yeah, you read like I do. Okay, all right, okay, yeah, you're here." And so now I read for her. I read for her Apothecary and Potions throughout the week.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited because I'm sure that some of you know is that this weekend, actually, when this airs, it'll be probably Sunday. So during this weekend, I'm doing my 3-night, day and night lockdown at the Haunted Hotel, which, as y'all know, how I am into the axe murders everywhere and stuff. And so I'm still on my quest to find the Axeman. And what's kind of coincidental is Richard-Lael lives like right down the street
down the
from the last murder.
Right down the
Who
street.
knew?
Right down the street. So I was, at the time, COVID, and I moved to upstate New York, and then I was in Long Island. And then I thought, okay, Salem or New Orleans, Salem is nice, but they take themselves too seriously, and it's so Anglican British. It's anyway.
Never been.
It's nice. I have a lot of friends in Salem, but then it was sort of like, oh, you know what? I really like this house, and so I contact them, and I didn't hear anything back, and then a couple of months later, he says, the man that I had been chatting with, he said, "Oh, we have taken it off the market to renovate, and now it's back on the market, and we'd love to have you." And I went, "Oh, sure, I'm coming to New Orleans. Why not?" It turns out that the house is haunted, and I would come home, I'd find pictures all of my pictures on the floor.
What?
And I would go, okay, and I'd put them all back up. And then I would hear moving and running and shuffling, and I went, okay, maybe it's just the neighbor, maybe they're just really noisy, maybe it's just the neighbor. And then they moved out. And I would lie down in bed, and I would hear my lamps start from the front parlor, and all of them have crystals and glass, and they all make little noises as you walk, because it's a wooden structure. And so it would start in the front room, and I would hear clink, 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 clink. And it would go through the second parlor and into the hallway, and it would come right outside of my door. And I'd sit up, and there was nothing. And I'd lie down, and they would go the other way, and they'd go back and forth. And oh, there's someone in my house. Okay, I'm new to New Orleans. I've heard some stories. Should I call the cops right now? What should I do? I don't know. Maybe I should call the cops. So I get my phone and I turn on that light. Okay, there's nobody here. And I go through the entire front. I'm flipping on the lights as I'm going towards the front of the house, and I look out the mail slot, and there's nobody. Okay, so I open the door. There's nobody, and I look into the neighboring house, and there's nobody, and I go, okay. okay, all right, okay. So I go back and I lie down. Clink, 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 clink. And then it gets to the point where they are right outside of my door. And I hear this metallic scraping. And I thought, okay, if I call the cops, I know there's nothing here. There's really nothing here. They're going to think I'm crazy. I'll never come if there is anything. So I'm just not going to call. I'm not going to call. I found the next morning that I have this bookshelf in the hallway that has drawers in the bottom. And both of the handles were flipped up. It was sitting there playing with the handles.
The thing, clink, clink, clink.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So I said to this person, whoever there was, I said, okay, now you have to go away now. You have to stop.
Right.
You just have to not disturb me. But they've been mostly silent. And then I found that they started knocking on my headboard.
Oh.
And it covers the window, but it's a big wooden, I'll hear them walking around my bed, and I've had to turn my light on a couple of nights, and I go, okay. And then I found out that I went, why, what happened in this area? What is this? I found out that just one street down from me I'm not going to tell you the street, but one street down from me is where the last axe murder took place. And I went, I betcha it's this fella, because I've had this sensation about the door. And I thought, okay,
Yep.
that's who I'm dealing with.
I believe it, because I don't believe in coincidences. I got to meet Sam Baltrusis, a mutual friend of ours. Got to meet him, and y'all know, he's descended from the Borden family and writes, the books, and was in the Curse of Lizzie Borden, and then I'm really excited because, on another note, that Richard-Lael and Sam and I are going to be at the Hard Rock Cafe November the 1st. Get your tickets, and it's going to be really great. Have a seance.
Yeah.
I was trying to call it a misseance, but it just didn't have the same.
Semistiance?
Yeah, it doesn't have the same as salmons.
Right.
And he spoke up first, so we're going with, I guess we have to go with it. But, it's just, I don't know why that it is, but it's just always like the axe connection. I'm sure there's a story there or something, but it's always a connection.
And you know what's funny? I don't really like jazz music. And maybe that's why. Maybe that's why. That's why. Because
I'm in New Orleans and I hate jazz music. What the hell was that?
I don't like jazz music.
Yeah. Well, it's not for everyone.
You know what? I have to be in a real mood. So most of the time, the music that I listen to is classical music. And then if I'm feeling really modern, I might listen to some hot jazz, some 1920s, da-da-da-da,
Right.
da-da-da-da-da. I might, but I listen to it for maybe 15 minutes max, maybe. And then I'm like, okay, now my ears are bleeding, I'm done.
Right.
But if I'm really feeling modern, I might listen to that. But I mostly I'm just classical music.
Who's your favorite composer?
Well, I Mozart, of course, but Tommasino Albione. Most people don't even know who he is, but he's actually one of my favorites.
I'll check him out. Now, Mozart, I know. Albione.
Tommasino Albione.
Okay, I'll check it out. Then we, I'll be on the same page with that. So we're doing the lockdown, as I was saying, this weekend. So hopefully you'll have time, to stop by and see. But I do, and you had mentioned to me too. We talked. I feel like the Axeman is going to be there.
Oh, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think the Axeman is going to be there for certain. No jazz music though, because he wants you to play jazz music.
Yes, and see, we're doing karaoke for an hour on Saturday, and I said no jazz.
Nope.
That way he'll be like, "Oh, what's going on here?" And then he knows me anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, it's going to be an interesting time. So, any final messages or anything you'd like to give us? Some words of wisdom, or
Words of wisdom.
don't double park in the French Quarter.
That is, don't park in the French Quarter.
Right at all. Right.
Oh, here's another thing I've learned about the French Quarter. Don't wear sandals in the French Quarter.
Please do not.
Do not wear
Ever.
sandals. Ooh, do not wear sandals
Ever.
in the French Quarter. Oh, also, speaking of shoes in the French Quarter, someone says, I know where you got your shoes. Walk
No.
away.
Right.
The thing is, they'll say, you got them on your feet, which is fine. Okay, fine. But then you have to give them like $5.
I'll say that cost you $5 right there.
So pretend you live here.
Right. Just keep walking.
Keep walking.
Know
Thanks.
your shoes, where your shoes are. So everybody, thank you so much for watching. Richard-Lael, thank you so much for being here.
I am
It was
honored.
truly an honor for me.
My honor.
Yeah. And so the journey and the quest still continues down my path of learning more about the paranormal. So until next time, everyone, have a good night.